Taf.
I'm Rhea. We are students of English Language Studies at Sanata Dharma University.
What comes in your mind when you hear the words task, evaluation, and assessment? When you hear the word task in any classroom settings, your thought is not likely to be positive, pleasant, and affirming. The anticipation of a task is almost always accompanied by the feeling of anxiety and self-doubt. It's like we live by them and we die by them. Whereas, can tests promote positive experiences? Can tests bring out the best in students? Well, the answer is sounding yes. But how? How to create more authentic and intrinsically motivating test procedures that are appropriate and offer constructive feedback for the students? Well, that's all partly our presentation is all about.
We are going to discuss the basic concept of test, evaluation, and assessment, especially in English education. To begin with, we have divided our presentation into 5 sections. Those are the rationale, the differences, the types, the principles, and the methods. Let's start with the first section. I will be presenting the rationale of evaluation and/or assessment in English education. The term rationale means the principles or the reasons which explains a particular decision, course of action, and belief. So what is the rationale of evaluation and assessment? Why we need them and why is it important? Now I invite you to look at the picture on the screen. Imagine yourself as a teacher. Why do you think you need assessment? Why do you need to assess the students? And as a student, why do you think you need to be assessed? Why did you decide to take the test? Why did you do your assignment? The rationale of assessment can be seen from different points of view. The students, the educator or teachers, the program design, the activity, and the curriculum. Have you ever imagined the world without assessment? Well, your answer might be varied. It can be either positive or negative. It is also possible that you have no fixed answer right now. But never mind. Assessment reveals large amounts of data and information in order to justify the judgment. For the teachers, assessment is conducted in order to obtain and collect data which is further used to promote, enhance, and improve the quality of learning. It is also to measure and confirm the standard of students' performance and achievement in relation to the learning objectives. It can be also to reward the students' effort and achievement with an appropriate judgment. For the students, assessment is taken in order to achieve a particular standard, to evaluate and reflect the quality or performance as deep as possible, to better understand the lack and needs of themselves, to enable them to make judgment about their progress sufficiently. For the curriculum, assessment involves collecting and analyzing information about a program's activities, characteristics, and outcomes. It is competent to critically examine a program and make judgments about a program in order to inform programming decisions. It can also help to provide relevant information in order to continuously evaluate and improve the quality of the curriculum and the effectiveness of the teaching and learning process. Also, to investigate to what extent the program is achieving its outcomes. Now that we have an idea from different points of view, let's turn our attention back and answer the question. What is the rationale of evaluation and assessment in English education? Why do we need assessment? It is because we need a tool or instrument which is reliable to ease the process of forming ideas, judgment, and measurement, and to help achieving a particular level of quality. In simple terms, this means that assessment is a resolution to meet that demands.
I believe that you are already familiar with the terms assessment, test, and evaluation, as I mentioned those words repeatedly again and again in the first section. But you might be thinking that they are synonymous. In fact, they are not. But how are they different? We will find out the answer in the second section.
In the second section, we will be looking at the major differences of task, evaluation, and assessment. Task, evaluation, and assessment. They overlap each other but not interchangeable, which means that they cover the same areas of ideas but cannot be exchanged because the terms do not have the same meaning. Well, I would like you to look at the pyramid here. This pyramid has triangular shape, which shows that each section has a different width from the others. This width indicates a level of hierarchy among the topics. As you can see here, that assessment comes at the bottom, followed by evaluation in the middle, and test at the top. I assume that you might now have an idea that assessment encompasses the widest domain. The differences among task, evaluation, and assessment can be seen clearly based on their purpose, nature, orientation, and timing. We have made a table here to help you better understand the differences. Firstly, let's talk about task. Task aims to measure students' knowledge, skill, and attitudes in order to determine what she or he knows or has learned. It is product-oriented, which means that the focus of measurement is the level of knowledge or skill that has been reached overall. In this case, the results present only numbers, score like 100, 80, 50, and grade like A, B, B+. Therefore, its nature is superficial, lacking any understanding of the student's true potential, since it is readily visible and do not provide thorough details. It is typically conducted at identifiable times in a curriculum, such as at the end of a lesson, chapter, or semester. Secondly, here comes evaluation. Evaluation aims to make a particular judgment based on criteria and evidence determining its value. It refers to the process of making judgment. It can be done by comparison either to similar things or to a standard. Therefore, its nature is judgmental. A test can be an evaluation if you analyze the findings to determine a judgment. For example, a student test marked 9 answers right out of 10. We can then make a judgment that the student did really good. So, when you do the evaluation, you use the result of what the student did at a specific performance, activity, or lesson, then carefully consider them to make sensible decisions. An evaluation is also product oriented, but in this case, the results can be numbers, words such as good, average, poor, excellent, or even determining words like pass or fail the exam. Same as tests, an evaluation happens at the end of a program. It is one moment in time. Thirdly, let's move to the last level of pyramid, which is assessment. Assessment is the process of documenting knowledge, skills, attitudes, and beliefs. The goal of assessment is to make improvements as opposed to simply being judged. Thus, the nature of assessment is diagnostic, since it critically identifies and carefully investigates certain areas like how the student is having problems in order to find the solution and how to solve the difficulties. Assessment allows you to describe and interpret the data and information collected in more measurable terms. In this case, the source of the data can be from tests, informal response to a question, over a comment, written work, listening, and reading practiced. Hence, tests are the subset of assessment if it happens informally during the lesson and aims to make an improvement. Assessment is process-oriented. In other words, it is recording the series of how the learning is going. It happens during the learning process and it can be incidental or intended. Assessment has become a popular term at all levels of education. There are many forms of test, evaluation, and assessment in English education. This leads us to the third section, which is the types of tests and assessment. The idea of using assessment to help learners and to advance learning has no doubt been around for centuries. To start with, we are going to deal with types of assessment. Winter, in 2003, wrote the changing prepositions to name the types of assessment. Those are of, for, and as. Subsequently, there are 3 different terms of assessment based on its function: assessment for learning, assessment of learning, and assessment as learning. Firstly, assessment of learning is about evaluating what has been learned. In this formulation, assessment of learning is equated with summative assessment. It aims to measure or summarize what students have grasped and typically occurs at the end of a course or unit of instruction. A summation of what a student has learned implies looking back and taking stock of how well that student has accomplished the objectives, but does not necessarily point the way to future progress. Final exam in a course and general proficiency exams are example of summative assessment. Secondly, assessment for learning is about using evaluation to fit into the learning and teaching process and thus improve learning. Assessment for learning is also called formative assessment. Formative assessment aims to evaluate the students in the process of forming their competencies and skills with the goal of helping them to continue that growth process. Similarly, assessment for learning is viewed as a set of processes which provide learners with information about their progress and the outcomes required. In other words, it is an ongoing process. Assessment for learning is usually regarded very positively as a means of improving students' learning. However, Earl in 2003 regards that assessment for learning sees the teachers as the central characters, as they evaluate the students' performance, provide feedbacks, and organize appropriate learning activities based on their knowledge. Assessment for learning provides verification of students' attainment without allowing the summative function to dominate learning and teaching. Some forms of formative assessment are a command or a suggestion during learning process, call attention to an error, and all kind of feedback that is offered in order to improve the learner's language ability. Thirdly, assessment as learning is about evaluating the learning that takes place as students undertake assessment tasks. Charles in 2007 explains that assessment as learning is viewed as learning being able to manage and take responsibility for their own learning and progress by means of reflection and review. Here, I would like to quote what Brown, Collins, and Duckett in 1989 have said, that this view of assessment as learning links closely to ideas about authentic assessment and an aspect of assessment validity. That an assessment should be based on the performance of the knowledge, skill, and qualities that are genuinely valued. In contrast to the assessment for learning, assessment as learning emphasizes the student's role and engages them in self-assessment and as active participants in directing their own learning. As an example, what I am doing right now is considered as assessment as learning. The lecturer assigns me topic and allows me to explore the holistic view of the topic, then give me chance for independent learning. And this presentation is the outcome of my learning. One way to begin untangling the confusing terms created by distinguishing assessment of, for, and as learning is to better understand informal and formal assessment. They are types of assessment based on its technique. Let's begin with informal assessment. Informal assessment is embedded in classroom tasks and designed to elicit performance without recording results and making fixed judgment about a student's competence. Informal assessment can take a number of forms, starting with incidental, unplanned comments and responses like saying, "Nice job," "Good work." Also, coaching and other impromptu feedback to the students, for example, "Did you say can or can't? I think you meant to say you broke the class, not you break the class." It can also by simply putting a smile on some homework, marginal comments on papers, responding to a draft of an essay, advice about how to better pronounce a word, a suggestion for a strategy for a reading difficulty, showing how to modify a student's note taking to better remember the content of a lecture. On the other hand, formal assessment are exercises or procedures specifically designed to attain certain course objectives. They are systematic, planned, sampling techniques constructed to give an appraisal of student achievement. Formal assessment occurs periodically in the course of practice. Some examples of formal assessment are final exam, placement tests, standardized tests, and speeches as a progress test only if it is unprepared and rehearsed. I expect that now you already have a sense of where tests belong in the larger domain of assessment. You have also sorted through differences between formal and informal tests, formative and summative tests. We will now discuss about types of tests. Starting from three types that you will almost certainly need to create. Those are placement test, diagnostic test, and achievement test. Then two test types that you will probably not have many opportunities to create as a classroom teacher, which are language aptitude tests and language proficiency tests. First of all, we will talk about placement test. Placement test aims to place a student into a particular level or section in a language curriculum or school. A placement test usually, but not always, includes a sampling of the materials to be covered in the various courses in a curriculum. A student's performance on the test should indicate the point at which the student will find the material neither too easy nor too difficult, but appropriately challenging. Placement test is usually given to students entering an educational institution to determine specific knowledge or proficiency in various subjects for the purpose of assignment to appropriate courses or classes. For example, to determine whether the students belong to science, social, or language class in senior high school. Placement tests come in many varieties, such as assessing comprehension and production, responding through written and oral performance, open-ended and limited responses, selection like multiple choice, and gap like filling formats, depending on the nature of a program and its needs. The next is diagnostic test. A diagnostic test is designed to diagnose specified aspect of a language. A test in pronunciation, for example, might diagnose the phonological feature of English that are difficult for learners and should therefore become part of a curriculum. Usually, such tests offer a checklist of features for the administrator to use in pinpointing difficulties. A writing diagnostic will elicit a writing sample from students that would allow the teacher to identify those rhetorical and linguistic features on which the course needed to focus special attention. Diagnostic tests should elicit also information on what students need to work on in the future. Therefore, a diagnostic test will typically offer more detailed information of the learner. In a curriculum that has a form-focused phase, for example, a diagnostic task might offer information about a learner's acquisition of verb tenses, modal auxiliaries, definite articles, relative clauses, and irregular nouns. Now we will talk about achievement test. An achievement test is related directly to classroom lessons, units, or even total curriculum. Achievement tests are limited to particular material addressed in a curriculum within a particular period. The primary role of an achievement test is to determine whether course objectives have been met, and appropriate knowledge and skills has been acquired by the end of the period of instruction. Achievement tests range from 5 or 10 minutes quizzes to 3-hour final examination with almost infertile variety of item types and formats. Now we have come to language aptitude test. Language aptitude test is commonly used to predict a person's success prior to exposure to the second language. A language aptitude test is designed to measure capacity or general ability to learn a foreign language and ultimate success in that undertaking. Language aptitude tests are apparently designed to apply to the classroom learning of any languages. Some examples of standardized aptitude tests have been used in the United States is the Modern Language Aptitude Test, or MLAT. It mainly requires students to perform a number of language-related tests. There is no research to show unequivocally that those kind of tasks predict communicative success in a language, especially tutored by cuisine of the language. Because of these limitations, standardized aptitude tests are seldom used today. The last but not least, proficiency tests. A proficiency test aims to test global competence in a language. A proficiency test is not limited to any courses, either curriculum or a single skill in language. Rather, it tests overall ability. Proficiency tests have traditionally consisted of standardized multiple choice items on grammar, vocabulary, and reading comprehension. Sometimes a sample of writing is added, and more recent tests also include oral production performance. A typical example of standardized proficiency test is the test of English as a foreign language known as TOEFL, produced by the Educational Testing Service, and also the International English Language Testing System, or IELTS, which is the world's most popular English language proficiency test for higher education and global migration. Creating these tests and validating them with research is a time-consuming and costly process. Therefore, language teachers would be wise not to create an overall proficiency test on their own.
Well, how are you guys doing so far? I believe that you already have a clear understanding about the rationale of assessment, the difference between task, assessment, and evaluation, and also the types of assessment and task.
We know that there are many types of evaluation in English education, and each of them has different purpose. Then, have you ever imagined how to create an effective evaluation so that it can cover the aims of the evaluation itself? Let us say a teacher. It is impossible for a school teacher to create a task carelessly without any guideline. If it is happening, a set of evaluation might be felt to be used as a test instrument to evaluate the students as well as the teaching learning process that they have. Thus, in creating task evaluation or assessment, we have principles. The principles must be applied so that the evaluation can be conducted effectively and efficiently in measuring the ability of the test takers. Now, in this section, we are going to discuss about the principles of language assessment. As I mentioned before, there are principles to create a language assessment. The principles are used as the guidelines for both evaluating an existing assessment procedure and designing one on your own assessment, so that you can have effective assessment instruments. There are 5 principles of language assessment. They are practicality, reliability, validity, authenticity, and washback. The 5 principles cited here serve as an excellent foundation on which to evaluate existing instruments and to build your own. Now let us discuss it one by one. The first one is practicality. It can be simply defined as the relationship between available resources for the task. For example, human resources, material resources, time, and also other resources that will be required in the assessment. So a task is usually called practical when it is not excessively expensive, stays within appropriate time constraints, relatively easy to administer, and has a specific and efficient scoring procedure. The first point is not excessively expensive. It is about cost. The task should not be too expensive to conduct. It has to stay within the budget. Let us imagine, what do you think if a lecturer conduct a final test for one class consisting 25 students in graduate level that spends 500,000 for every student? It must be not practical at all, right? The second point is about time. The test should not be too long or too short. What do you think if a teacher wants to conduct an evaluation which takes 8 hours straight to complete? If it takes lots of time, it means that the test is not practical, since it will be exhausting and distracting the focus of the test takers. The third point is about the administration of the task. An evaluation process must be easy to administer, so that it will be comfortable for both the task taker and also the administrator. The last is about the scoring procedure. A practical assessment must have a clear scoring system. It is important so that it would not take a long time to check the answer and have the results of the test. It should be accompanied with scoring rubric, key answer, and so on to make it easy to score or evaluate. A practicality of a test is a must so that the evaluation process can be conducted repeatedly in different times with the same quality. Here comes the second point. The second point is reliability. A test is called reliable if it is consistent and dependable. It means that if the same test is given to the same student on two different occasions, the test should yield similar result. The issue of reliability of a test may best be addressed by considering a number of factors that may contribute to the unreliability of a test. Brown, in his book Language Assessment Principles and Classroom Practice, addressed 4 points that influence a reliability of a test. The first point is coming from the student. It is called student-related reliability. So the unreliability refers to temporary illness, fatigue, a bad day, anxiety, and other physical or psychological factors of the students. Thus, the score obtained of the students may not be his or her actual score. The next one is coming from the rater, which is called rater reliability. So it deals with the scoring process. Factors that can affect the reliability might be human error, subjectivity, and bias in scoring process. The third one, we have test administration reliability. The unreliability may also result from the condition which the test is administered. Various circumstances can affect how a test is administered. For example, a listening test, which is held in a noisy place, will disrupt students so that they may not perform well in the test, especially if the test taker sits near a window or door with a higher noise level. Other resources of unreliability are found in photocopying variations, the amount of light in different parts of the room, variation in temperature, and even the condition of desks and chairs. The last is called test reliability. So it refers to the test itself, whether the test fits into the time constraints or not. It means that the test should not be too long or too short. The items of the test should be clear, that it will not end with ambiguity. The next principle is validity. A validity in a test means that the test must aim to provide a true measurement of the particular skill which is intended to measure. For example, if a student is given a reading test about the metamorphosis of a butterfly, a valid test will measure the reading ability, such as identifying general into specific information of the text, and not his prior knowledge or biological knowledge about the metamorphosis of a butterfly. The task should make the student release on his reading ability to complete the task. The fourth major principle of language testing is authenticity. We can say that an authenticity in a test means that the test is likely to be enacted in the real world. Teachers should construct a test with the test items that are likely to be used or applied in the real context of daily life. These principles need to be considered since many test items fail to simulate real-world tasks. In a test, authenticity may be presented in some ways, for example, through the language. The language in the test is as natural as possible. And also it can be from the items. The items are contextualized rather than isolated. For the topics of a test can be meaningful, so it can be relevant and interesting for the learners. About the organization of test items, it is better if a teacher provides some thematic organization, for example, a storyline or episode. And also it can be from the task. The tasks represent real-world tasks. For example, a reading passage. A reading passage selected from real-world sources that the test takers are likely to have encountered or will encounter. Other example can be from listening comprehension. Listening comprehension section feature natural language with hesitation, noises, and interruptions. Now the last principle is washback. We can simply say that washback is the influence of the test on students. Moreover, washback also includes the effect of an assessment on teaching and learning prior to the assessment itself, that is, on preparation for the assessment. This influence itself can be positive or negative, so we have positive washback and negative washback. Positive washback has beneficial influence on teaching and learning. It means that teachers and students have a positive attitude toward the examination or test and work willingly and collaboratively towards its objective. On the other hand, negative washback does not give any beneficial influence on teaching and learning. Tests which have negative washback is considered to have negative influence on teaching and learning. Here is the example of positive washback. A positive washback can be achieved when a teacher can comment generously and specifically on test performance. Instead of only give a single letter grade or a numerical score, try to return a written test or a data sheet from an oral test with an information of intrinsic interest to the student. Even if your evaluation is not a neat little paragraph appended to test, you can respond to as many details throughout the test as time will permit. Give strategic hints on how a student might improve certain elements of performance. On the other hand, take some time to make the test performance an intrinsically motivating experience from which a student will gain a sense of accomplishment and challenge.
Knowing the principles of language assessment drives us into more clear understanding on how to make effective assessment instruments. Further, in this section, the focus will be on equipping you with the tools needed to create the task, assessment, and evaluation.
To create an effective assessment, it takes a lot of effort to design and long time to refine through trial and errors. An experienced teacher might find themselves developing by the time they make assessments in different contexts and situations. However, for a new teacher, the best way to create an assessment is to work within the guidelines of accepted. Slowly, with experience, then you can be more professional. Now let us consider some practical steps in constructing classroom tests. There are four methods to conduct an evaluation in English education. The first one is assessing clear, unambiguous objectives. The next one, drawing up task specifications. Then devising task tasks. And the last is designing multiple choice test items. The first one is assessing clear and unambiguous objectives. The first task when we are going to design a test, assessment, or evaluation is to determine appropriate objectives. To know the purpose of the test you are creating, you need to know what it is you want to test. The picture on the slide shows the example of objectives made for each aspect. Let us take a look at the form-focused objectives. The first objective of form-focused objectives serve a great example of clear and unambiguous objectives. Writing a clear objective like recognizing and produce tag questions with the correct grammatical form and final intonation pattern in simple social conversation is better than if we only write "Students will learn tag questions" or simply names the grammatical focus tag questions. That kind of objectives is not testable, since we do not know whether students should be able to understand them in spoken or written language, or whether they should be able to produce them orally in writing. Moreover, we also do not know in what context the grammatical focus will be learned. Is it a conversation, an essay, or an academic lecture, or other context? The next one is drawing up test specifications. Test specifications for classroom use can be a simple and practical outline of your test. It usually covers broad outline of the test, skills that will be tested, and what the items will look like. On the slide we have an example of test specification. This example gives us an indication of the topics or objectives that you will cover. For example, objective 3 or objective 1 or objective 2. And also the implied elicitation and response formats for items. For example, an audio tape, or writing short opinion, and so on. And then also the number of items in each sections. It is clear that we have 5 minimal pair items, we have 5 interpretation items, and so on. And the last, it also indicates the time to be allocated for each task. For example, 10 minutes for writing, 10 minutes for reading, 10 minutes for listening, 5 minutes per person for speaking. After drawing up task specification, things that we will do is devising tasks. Creating an evaluation requires a lot of effort to design and a long time to refine through trial and error. Thus, in this phase of devising tasks, there are some steps that must be done before a set of task assessment and evaluation can be applied. Let us imagine that we are going to create a task on listening and reading. First thing first, we need to make the draft of questions. To provide the sense of authenticity and interest, it is better for us to conform the questions to a certain context. The next step is starting to revise the draft. On revising the draft, some questions might help you to decide whether the questions is appropriate or not. Some important questions to ask yourself can be, are the directions to each section absolutely clear? Each item started in clear, simple language? Is the difficulty of each item appropriate for your students? Or is the language of each item sufficiently authentic? After answering those questions, the next step is we need to try out all the tasks on students before actually administering the task. But in the real classroom context, it is almost impossible. Alternatively, you could enlist the aid of a colleague to look over your task. In the final revision of the test, imagine that you are a student taking the test. Try to answer the test, time yourself, check out the written text, make sure that the audio has a clear voice, and so on. If some changes are needed, make the necessary adjustment. The last point of method or technique to conduct an evaluation in English education is designing multiple choice task items. Designing multiple choice items is a bold step to take. Multiple choice items, which may appear to be the simplest kind of item to construct, are extremely difficult to design correctly. We must spend more time designing the items, but it is all worth the effort since multiple choice task is practical and reliable. With their predetermined correct responses and time-saving scoring procedures, multiple choice items offer an easy and consistent process of scoring and grading. If your objective is to design a large-scale standardized test for repeated administrations, then multiple choice format does indeed become valuable. To make it easier, there are 4 guidelines for designing multiple choice items. First, you need to design each item to measure a specific objective. On the example here, the specific objective being tested is comprehension of WH questions. Option A is designed to ascertain that the students know the difference between an answer to WH questions and a yes-no question. Thus, the objective has been directly addressed. Option B, C, and D are designed to ascertain that the students know the meaning of the question. Second, state both STEM and options as simply and directly as possible. We are sometimes tempted to make multiple choice items too wordy. A good rule of thumb is to get directly to the point. The picture here shows a good example about simple and direct options of multiple choice. After that, the next step is make certain that the intended answer is clearly the only correct one. The example here serves as an example of unclear options. We can see that there are two plausible answers, which are option C and D. With only a minimum of context in each stem, a wide variety of responses might be perceived as correct. Thus, it is better for us to make certain that the intended answer is clearly the only correct one. And the last, use item indices to set, discard, or revise item. The appropriate selection and arrangement of suitable multiple choice items on a test can be best accomplished by measuring items against three indices. The first one is item facility. Item facility is the extent to which an item is easy or difficult for the proposed group of test takers. Second, item discrimination. It is the extent to which an item differentiates between high and low ability test takers. And the last is big data analysis. It is related to item discrimination. Measuring these three factors is a must, especially for standardized tests that they are designed to be administered a number of times and/or administered in multiple forms. Well, that was the last section of our discussion. Now we come to the end of this presentation. We hope that you find this video useful and beneficial so that you may have better understanding about basic concept of assessment in English education. We are always open to any suggestions, and if you guys have any questions, please kindly leave those at the comment section below or send us a message through our email. See you in the upcoming works. Bye!